Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Languages of natural life forms, animal language, animal communication, see also animal thinking. Contact Report 864.
1949.
All animals, creatures, and all other forms of natural life also have languages, only that these are of a completely different nature than the language of human beings. It is given that every animal genus and every separate species, as well as every animal genus and every separate species, and therefore also every other genus of natural life forms and their species, each has its own language. In this, each genus and each species of natural life forms has its own language, which can simply be louder, whistling, chirping, hissing, roaring, snorting, cooing, barking, meowing, growling, or otherwise, depending on the genus or species of the life form in question. Thus, language is simply certain sounds, movements, and motions, etc., as well as the most diverse behaviors, which actually function as a normal means of communication in order to communicate with each other or with other and different life forms. Depending on what it is or is supposed to be, the corresponding language, that is to say the communication, appears appreciative, friendly and good, or as dangerous, attacking, fear-inducing or rejecting, etc. Thus, in the case of natural life forms, such as oxen, cows, horses and pigs, or goats, sheep, chickens or geese, as well as, of course, lions, zebras, crocodiles or elephants, tigers, camels and dromedaries, etc. Each has its own language, that is to say, means of communication, which corresponds to the life form. All natural life forms, like the human beings, also have their own innate language, that is to say, possibility of communication, which also includes the so-called domestic animals. And depending on the type of life form, it is natural to expand this possibility of communication by means of a specific learning possibility. It is a fact that all living beings also have a certain intelligentum, with which they can train and thus learn through some circumstances or through imitation, etc. Through their language and their behavior and through any other means of communication, very many of all the life forms of nature can also somehow communicate with other life forms and even make friends with them. As is also the case, for example, with dogs and cats, etc., which are normally enemies of each other from the ground up, but which can get on very well with the human beings and peacefully associate with them, but can also develop feelings and thus also attachment and good togetherness. Contrary to the erroneous opinion of the human beings, so-called higher natural beings not only have a certain degree of intelligentum, but also have the ability of instinctive thinking, and thus of forming feelings, as well as of feeling and sensing, which is, not alone, a reason why animals, creatures, and also completely all other genera and species of natural life forms are not to be harassed and not to be tortured. Every higher species and every kind of natural life form, so called because they differ from the human being as a conscious thinking being, is, as mentioned, capable of instinct thinking, while lower and lowest life forms are capable of impulse thinking, sensation thinking, or only reaction thinking and reaction acting. Nevertheless, all forms of life, and indeed all forms of nature as a whole, have the ability to speak a language by which they can communicate with each other, at least within their own genus or species. As mentioned, this is specific to one's own genus or species, which can also be absolutely different in terms of groups and habitats, which means that, for example, cattle use and practice a completely different language or dialect than the same genus or species that lives, for example, only 250 meters away. So it is the same as with human beings who, for example, live in Switzerland and speak Swiss German in a certain dialect, but in various dialects in other areas probably also speak Swiss German, but a completely different dialect. Nevertheless, it is possible for natural beings that are completely foreign to each other, that is to say animals, creatures and other living beings, as well as plants of all kinds and species, to communicate with each other. This is despite the fact that they speak a foreign language, so to speak, as is also the case with human beings who speak, for example, Swiss German, German, French, Italian, English, Chinese or Arabic, Urdu or Hindi, etc., but who can communicate with each other despite the language barriers and without the need for an actual interpreter. On Earth there are many thousands of actual languages and dialects among human beings alone. There may be 10,000 or more or less, but among natural beings there are many millions. This is precisely because their immense diversity of genera and species is in the millions. But in humanity it is only small, and there is actually only one genus, the human being, from which, however, various species are given.